these are some examples of my sort of self-watering planters, or wicking beds, whatever you want to call them really, made from these reclaimed containers. But there's different methods of doing these, and what I found is this is just the base of a container cut down, and it's got a little spigot here so you can water it from here, and then these are the little planters that go on top, and this is just a little shallow sort of green roof tray, or what I call a green roof tray. This one here, the only difference here between this container, the base one, and this one, this is just made from a black container, otherwise it's identical, and that's got a black PVC elbow and a little upstand there for watering it. That one's just got a white PVC. I think the black ones look better when they're outside. These ones are nice when they're set into the ground with a little water bottle here like that, just to feed the water into the container. Slightly different there. I'm not sure I can lift this up with one hand. I might need to put the phone down. Just bear with me. I don't know if you're going to be able to see, but this is actually, this planter here is another reservoir, but it's made from the top of a container rather than the base of the container. So if you see this one here, this has got the top of the container. What I do is I put the screw cap on there, put a little bit of silicone around it, screw it on nice and tight, and then I drill a hole through and then put one of these grommets on here, and then that will have a PVC pipe standing up here. So that's like an overflow, a bit like a cold water storage tank in a loft. You have an overflow there. When the water comes up to that level, a little bit more, and then it drops down to the overflow, and then that runs down into the container below. So really that's just a irrigation. This is just irrigation, but what I've found is, if you bear with me while I lift this one up, I've just made these, so they're not really completely, the capillary action hasn't started to dampen this cardboard. I just literally just put that on. But what I've found is here, you've got the cans underneath this. You can just see the cans there, so that's the subfloor, and then there's logs in here. The logs will act as a capillary wick as well. They're standing in water, so they'll be saturated, and they'll wick through to this layer here. Ideally I want some sort of subfloor, so there's just a little bit of air gap between the irrigation, or the top level of the irrigation, which is defined by these holes here. And then, so the idea is that drains down, and then the soil's got a little bit of a level there just to dry out, so it's not completely waterlogged. And these, on this occasion, they will actually go up a little bit higher than that. But what I normally do is put some logs on here, some sticks and things like that, just to support subfloor. So there's a little bit of aeration as well, and then there's some irrigation. But what I wanted to show here is on this container, and I'll just have to put the phone down briefly. I'll just lift this up. Yeah, so what I found here is these plants actually grow really well when there's a substrate on top of this, and they're just rooting, shallow rooting into here, so they're getting all the irrigation and making a nice display as well. So I thought that's quite a nice option, to have another planter, another level of planting actually in the irrigation tray itself. So what you've got here, this one, if you bear with me, if you imagine that one there that's got the overflow inside, so if you water that, once it hits that level of the overflow pipe, that water will drain down. So if this container's standing on top of that one, the irrigation from that one will run down into this container here. So if you can imagine, if you could stack these up, you can have 3 or 4 of those high. You might need a little bit of support, a stake or a piece of wood or something to support them. But that means that when you water from the top, that water's overflowing into the next one, into the next one, into the next one. And then if you've got the one on the bottom, you could have watered that from here as well. So it just means that there's no waste water when you're watering these, so it's quite nice. And if you've got one here that's got this pipe on here, you can water it maybe over a half hour or so. Give it water, let it percolate through, give it a bit more water, let it percolate through, and then you'll see the water coming up into this level here. So it shows you the whole thing is full, like a sort of storage of water. But then on each level you've got that planting layer as well, so you've got plants there, so plants there, plants on top. And what I'm in an iron about is, obviously these are sedums, so they're not actually growing into that water. But what I thought about combining it with is sort of something like this, where you've got water forget-me-not. And I don't really know how this is going to work, but what I kind of imagined is that you've got sort of bog plants that will thrive in that still water. So the roots will work around there. They'll take up some of that excess water. That water will drop down. They'll be kept alive because they've got that irrigation there. And then routinely you can just top that up. But what that means is you've actually got root zone in that irrigation, then aeration, and then you've got plants growing in that top layer as well. But I'm not really familiar with, well, I don't really know what would root in those sort of conditions. I mean, something like that, if that was the water forget-me-not, and then that container sort of stands on there like so, there's going to be a bit of space there. The crown of the plant isn't going to be in water, but I don't know if it needs to be or it doesn't need to be. But my experience with bog plants is they tend to be quite large, quite leafy sort of plants, and I don't think they grow particularly well in these sort of containers. But something like a water forget-me-not, if I can get that to grow down there, then I'm using all those that level of the irrigation as well. And then what I'd be doing is just top dressing on here with part composted material or part composted wood chip, or even sort of banana peels and apple cores and things like that, just to provide a little bit of food. So you're sustaining a sort of vermicomposting as well, and then you're combining that with bog plants and then plants at these different levels. And if you imagine, if there's a sort of central pipe, an overflow pipe that runs between one and the other, in theory worms would be able to actually move between that pipe vertically to this level and then up to the next level, up to the next level as well. So it would be like a sort of always sort of tiered display or planting sort of container. So I think these work quite well as vertical containers, but when I first planted these up, I didn't realise that level here would be quite so good for actually growing in plants as well. I've got forget-me-nots in there, I've got this sedum, I've got some ivy leaf toe flax, I've got some mind your own business as well, so that's all sort of growing around, and it's really just to provide a little bit of root zone to help break down the material on here. And then you've got the worms in there as well. But that's really quite nice, and that's really quite damp, because obviously it's got that irrigation right underneath. And the container above, if you grow in these sort of little green roof containers as well, then that will sit on there, and that will act as a capillary wick for that container as well. So you've got the green sort of roof, and then you've got the different tiers, different levels, all with irrigation. First of all, when I started making these, I thought I'd have more of a vertical planter in between, so not quite as cut down as this one, so there'd be about a foot. But I didn't realise that, yeah, each one could have its own sort of level of irrigation as well. So lots of different ideas, but if you've got any ideas what sort of bog plants and water plants I could actually plant in those containers, I think that would be another sort of facet that would really add to these. And these ones are just sedums here, and that one I've just got some roots of some comfrey just to get some green manures going as well. Yeah, so thanks for watching.